In this segment, we're going to cover Salesforce Maps configuration. As we introduce the concept of Salesforce Maps configuration, let's start with Salesforce Maps permission settings. As we discuss Salesforce Maps permissions, there's three areas we'd like to focus on. Number one, creating and assigning group permissions. Number two, assigning button sets to permission groups. And then number three, planning, configuring, and assigning folder permissions. So let's start from the beginning. Assuming that your company has just purchased Salesforce Maps, a product that provides location intelligence technology to Salesforce users. You've been tasked with the job of configuring Salesforce Maps in your organization. So let's start the configuration journey by reviewing permissions. Even though Salesforce Maps follows the same overall security structure as your Salesforce org, there are some permission settings that are specific to Salesforce Maps. So before we can review these permissions, we need to access the Salesforce Maps configuration menu. If you don't have access, then contact your Salesforce administrator to request access. We assume that Salesforce Maps is installed and Salesforce Map permission set licenses are assigned. If it's not, that's okay. In the Salesforce Setup menu, take the following steps and be sure to follow the order of operation. Add the permission set license before the permission set. So the steps are, number one, in the quick find search bar, search for and select users. Number two, select the user you wish to assign the permission set license. Number three, locate the permission set license assignment section and edit the assignment. Number four, select one or more rows and save. For example, for Salesforce Maps, users will need the Salesforce Map permission set license assigned. Number five, we next scroll to the permission set assignment and select edit assignment. Number six, assign the permission set to match the license you assigned. For example, for Salesforce Map, the Salesforce Maps permission set is required. Next is the Salesforce Maps permission groups. Here we'd need to navigate to Salesforce Setup, search for installed packages, and then select Configure next to Salesforce Maps. Once in the configuration menu, select permission groups to grant or restrict access to features in Salesforce Map. You can edit an existing permission group or create a new one, determine which features specific users and profiles need, and then assign the user or profile to the corresponding permission group. For the sake of this exercise, we're going to assume that we have a retail company called Lovely Course. So let's look at how Lovely Course, a custom retail company, configures permission groups. Lovely Course purchased Salesforce Maps for its sales and marketing teams. They were interested in the following features. Number one, Folder Administrator, which gives a select group of users the ability to manage user access and visibility to shared folders. Number two, Allow Marker Exports, which helps the outside sales team export marker layer data into a CSV file. Number three, Edit Details tab field, which allows users to make inline edits to Salesforce fields from the tooltip menu in Salesforce Maps. For examples, users can update the status of an opportunity stage from negotiation to closed won. And number four, enable the weather tab, which helps users prepare for travel by viewing current and forecasted weather conditions. In addition, the number of markers a user may return in a single marker layer should be set to 50,000, which is the maximum number of markers. Jason Williams is a Salesforce admin responsible for configuring Salesforce Maps at Lovely Course. So he creates permission groups and assigns users and profiles based on features identified in the following chart. Jason creates a permission group for the marketing team. He selects the required features and keeps all the other default values. Where available, he selects the Allow User Override checkbox. This lets users customize specific features in their Salesforce Maps user interface. For example, Jason selects the default base map value as ESRI Street, but users can optionally change the base map selection to display Google Road as their map preference. Finally, he selects the assignment tab and adds the marketing user profile to that permission group. He repeats these steps for inside sales, outside sales, and admins. Since Jose is a sales manager and requested his access to be the same as the admin permission group, Jason simply adds him as a user to the admin permission group. All other features on the group permission list are left unchecked. Creating and assigning button sets. Button sets are actionable buttons assigned to permission groups. When creating a button set, focus on adding role-specific buttons that help users with their job on a daily basis. In most organizations, sales teams have access to buttons like create routes, create schedules, and add new events or tasks. Likewise, marketing teams often have access to the Add to Campaign button. At Lovely Course Retail, Jose determines which actions each team needs in Salesforce Maps and then creates a button set for each team. Configuring a button set is similar to configuring a page layout in Salesforce. Simply drag buttons from the available button list to one or more of the available sections. Now remember, as a best practice, when naming a button set, your nomenclature should clearly identify the relevant permission group it's meant for. In this case, Jose chooses outside sales as the name for the button set meant for the outside sales team. Once button sets are created and saved, Jose returns to permission groups and assigns the correct button set for each permission group. Access to folder permissions. Once you have completed assigning features and actions to users through permission groups, you are now ready to configure another level of access by setting up folder permissions. Folders are located in the Salesforce Maps user interface. Users can have access to all folders or specific folders based on folder permissions allocated to them. Understanding the importance of each folder level helps you determine the best way to organize folders in your environment. There are 3 folder levels in Salesforce Maps. Number 1, personal folder. Personal folder contains private folders and layers unique to an individual user. Remember, visibility into the folder is granted or restricted in permission groups as discussed in the Salesforce Map permission group section. Number 2, user folder. The user folder contains personal user folders and follows the Salesforce role hierarchy set forth in your Salesforce org. This folder allows admins and managers to create layers for individual users and create and provide visibility into personal folders. Visibility into this folder is granted or restricted in permission groups. And then number 3, corporate folder. Corporate folder contains public shared folders. All users with Salesforce Maps access have access to all subfolders and layers in the corporate folder unless folder level permissions are set. As a recommendation, we want to grant users access to folders that contain content relevant to their business needs. For example, the folder assigned to the sales team might include opportunity and account marker layers, where content for service teams may include cases and service requests. Create subfolders in the corporate folder, one for each team, and grant user or profile access to the relevant folders. The most common use of folder permissions is by controlling access to subfolders in the corporate folder. This starts by enabling the folder permission checkbox on the settings page of the Salesforce Map configuration menu. Once checked, any user with folder admin permission can create subfolders in the corporate folder and assign folder permissions. So in this table, we can see how Jose has set up folder permissions for Salesforce Map licensed users. He starts by creating subfolders in the corporate level, one for each team, for instance, sales, outside sales, management, and marketing. Next, he grants the following level of access based on the user profile or specific users. Only layers inside of subfolders in the corporate folder are subject to permission settings. If a layer sits directly under the corporate folder, it will be visible to all users. Subfolders also inherit permissions from its parent folder. The permissions configuration process is complete, and you are now one step closer to introducing Salesforce Map to your users. In this section of Salesforce Maps configuration, we're going to dig into configuring for location accuracy. In our journey through Salesforce Maps configuration, now we're going to focus on how to configure for location accuracy. So we're going to focus on three areas. Number one, explaining the Salesforce Maps geocoding process. Number two, configuring base objects in Salesforce Maps. Number three, configuring Salesforce Maps for address changes. So let's take an example where you're on a business trip, you're searching for a nearby restaurant on your phone. Next thing you know, pins appear on the map. You select the nearby restaurant and get turn-by-turn directions. You trust your mapping application to place markers on the map in the correct location. Sounds very familiar. Now imagine your frustration and disappointment if the returned location was inaccurate and you ended up, instead of in a restaurant, in an abandoned warehouse. So location accuracy is critical for every mapping situation. Within Salesforce Maps, companies rely on location accuracy to ensure their users can visualize data, plan territories, and create accurate routes and schedules. To ensure this is done properly, organizations must configure their environment with location data and tell Salesforce Maps where that data is stored. So the first step is geocoding process. The first step in the process is understanding how Salesforce Maps reads location data. This is done through geocoding, which converts addresses into geographical coordinates, such as latitude and longitude. You can use these coordinates to place markers on a map or adjust its position. In the world of Salesforce Maps, a Salesforce record must point to a latitude and longitude fields that are populated with coordinates in order to be plotted on a map. A typical geocoding process will start with a physical address on a record in Salesforce, like the billing address on the account record. Users trigger geocoding in one of two ways: on demand, by plotting a record on the map, or through batch automation, which runs a batch to automatically geocode records. Once triggered, Salesforce Map reaches out to Geocoding API to convert the physical address into latitude and longitude coordinates. Those coordinates are stored on fields in Salesforce and used to place markers on the map. So how does Salesforce Map know which address and coordinate fields to use? The answer lies in the configuration of base objects. Data integration rules can also be used to update your accounts, contacts, and leads with geocodes. Geocode fields are available for standard addresses on accounts, contacts, and leads in Salesforce. These fields aren't visible on records, but can be viewed by using the Salesforce API. To understand base objects, let's conduct a short review of Salesforce objects. Salesforce supports several different types of objects. The most common types are standard and custom objects. Standard objects are objects that are included with Salesforce. Accounts, contacts, leads, and opportunities are standard objects examples. And then secondly, custom objects. which are objects that you create to store information that's specific to your company or industry. Think of objects as containers for your information or tables in the database. For example, the account object contains all of your account records. With that in mind, first determine which records you like to display on the map and select the container for these records as your base object. Now secondly, let's identify where the address and latitude and longitude fields are stored. These fields can be stored on the base object or an associated object. In many cases, the address fields for the opportunity objects are located on the account object. And now in the final step, let's select which address, latitude, and longitude fields to use. You've now configured a base object. Once saved, Salesforce Maps will know which address field to geocode if they're not already geocoded, and which latitude and longitude fields to read when plotting data on the map. When selecting latitude and longitude fields, you can use either standard latitude and longitude fields, or you can create custom fields. If creating custom latitude and longitude fields, select the number field type and identify length as 3 and decimal place as 15. Now, as a best practice, plan your base object configuration by determining which object or objects will be used to visualize data in Salesforce Maps. It's helpful to create a chart that identifies the address and latitude and longitude fields for each object. This is especially helpful if your organization will be plotting data from multiple objects and different standard and custom location fields, as we can see in the sample chart. Now, talking about address changes. Imagine you received a promotion, but it requires that you relocate to a different state. Once you move, you need to notify people of your new address. The same is true for records in Salesforce. When a company moves its physical location, you must update the address fields in Salesforce. However, if you aren't using data integration rules, updating the physical address field won't automatically update the latitude and longitude coordinates for records previously geocoded. You will need to ensure that Salesforce Maps is aware of the address change, removes the latitude and longitude coordinates, and when triggered, geocodes the record using the updated address. Fortunately, you can automate this process in a number of ways. For example, you can configure workflow rules or process builder to tell Salesforce Maps to automatically clear coordinates when an address change happens in Salesforce. Another way is to use batch automation to schedule the automatic removal of latitude or longitude coordinates for an object. This is normally done if all records for an object require new coordinates. If you have activated data integration rules and you're using standard geocode fields on the account, contact, and lead, the latitude and longitude values are automatically updated when the physical address changes. Configuring automation is the recommended process, but you can also manually clear coordinates for one marker or multiple markers after records are plotted on the map. So in summary, now that you're familiar with geocoding process in Salesforce Map, in the next unit, we'll be looking at Salesforce Map features. So in this section of Salesforce Map configuration, we're going to look at additional Salesforce Maps features. As we explore through additional Salesforce Map features, we're going to focus on 3 areas. Number 1, providing suggestions and recommendations about Salesforce Maps features. Number 2, explaining the benefits of check-in, out with custom disposition. And then number 3, explain the benefits of click to create. As a Salesforce Maps admin, asking the right questions can help guide the user experience and proactively provide insight into features that help users get the most out of Salesforce Maps. Let's start by looking at the configuration menu. Navigate to Salesforce Setup, search for installed packages, and then select Configure Next to Salesforce Maps. On the settings page, the first feature, folder permissions, we've already covered in the permission module. But what about other features listed on this page? So we're going to look at that together. Let's imagine you're configuring Salesforce Maps and you must determine if any of these features should be selected. Here are some questions that you can ask to understand how your users will be using Salesforce Maps and then provide guidance on which features to enable. For instance, do users of Salesforce Maps with duplicate names exist in your organization? And second question, are users using Salesforce Maps on their mobile device? Third question, do you want to limit users' visibility to other user routes? Another question, are your users going to use check-in out to log customer visits as a task in Salesforce? The last feature on the setting page is the debug logs checkbox. This checkbox should never be selected unless a support case is open when the Salesforce Maps and they request enabling debug logs to capture data for troubleshooting. So the question now is, what are some other commonly used features? Once you have a better idea of how users plan to use Salesforce Maps, you can probe deeper. For example, if they plan to use Salesforce Maps on their mobile device, what are some features you could recommend to help with their overall experience? Two main features are check-in out with custom disposition and click to create. In order for users to take advantage of these features, they must be added to a user's button set, as discussed. Get started with the Salesforce Maps permissions. So let's look at the check-in out with custom disposition. The check-in out feature lets you quickly log a task or event directly from the Salesforce Map mobile interface. It can be added as a button for mobile users. Also, a custom disposition page can be added to the check-in out feature to allow users to quickly enter notes when checking in or out of a task in Salesforce. To take advantage of check-in out with the custom disposition tool, some configuration is required. This includes creating a task field set in Salesforce to indicate the fields you would like users to complete when they're custom disposition. After creating the field set, simply add the name of the field set to the activity settings page in the Salesforce Map configuration menu. Once configured and the button is added, using the custom disposition tool with check-in out can be presented as a key feature that helps users save time and stay organized simply by tracking activity in the Salesforce Maps interface. Now let's look at the click to create. Another commonly used feature is click to create, which allows users to save time by creating a record like a lead or an account directly in Salesforce Maps interface. This feature can be used on a computer or mobile device, often as a prospecting tool. For example, if you're using Salesforce Maps on your phone to find a nearby business, you can search for businesses and then add a business as a lead record in Salesforce by selecting the Click to Create button. Like check-in out, Click to Create requires some configuration, including creating a field set in Salesforce, completing the Click to Create page in the Salesforce Map configuration menu, and adding a Click to Create button to the user's button set. This configuration goes a long way. This is a feature many users ask for and is beneficial for sales users searching for a potential prospect with Salesforce Maps.